Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. Today the video, what I'm going to talk about is the Lumix ZS200. So I've done several videos on this camera before, but there's something that I wanted to address because I've seen some reports online that say that the lens, this 12 to 360 millimeter equivalent, which is like 8.8 to 132 millimeter in real focal length terms. But you'll see people saying that this lens is soft at the long end. And this has not been my experience in general, however. And the however is this. This is, people know, this camera does have 5-axis image stabilization, unless you're shooting 4K video. And it does a really good job, except if you're shooting telephoto, and especially things that are close to you, you gotta be a little careful. Now, I have this camera set up to use 1/125th of a second as its minimum shutter speed when I am in program mode or in aperture priority. So that's in the settings, so you can set the lower limit to your shutter speed. And so what I've found is that if I'm in program, just walking around having a good time, taking a hike, something, and I see something, and I want to zoom in on it and take a shot with this camera, and I leave it in program mode, what the camera generally does, because this is not a very fast lens, unless it's really bright, the camera lowers the shutter speed all the way down to 1/125th of a second. And although the image stabilization on this camera is very good, at that point, being zoomed to full telephoto, it's got its work cut out for it. And so what I generally do is I switch over to shutter priority and set the shutter speed to 1/250th of a second. And I decided I should probably quantify that. So what I did was I just went right outside our building here. It's early fall, leaves are falling. We got a yew hedge and has some deciduous leaves falling on it. And I went out and shot one shot using center point autofocus. So I shot this leaf and I shot it at 1/125th of a second. And then I raised the shutter speed to 1/250th of a second. And so let's look at the results. So here is the image that I shot. And this is at 1/125th of a second. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to zoom in on this leaf. And look at that. That's pretty soft, right? But then when I switch the shutter speed over to 1/250th of a second, and we zoom in on this, you can see there's quite a visible difference in sharpness. This is quite a bit sharper. So I had the center autofocus point right over this leaf. Now, of course, the ISO actually crept up to ISO 800 for the first image, and then because of the shutter speed change, went to ISO 1600, still just fine. So here's the image after I processed it. I changed the profile to vivid. The originals were shot in natural. Then just did some Lightroom work on it to give it a little pop. So I think you can see that that makes a big difference. You know, it's just, although the image stabilization is very good, there's actually a physical reason why it's going to have trouble when you zoom it to the telephoto end. And that is that, as you might remember from probably high school science class, Newton's first law of motion. A body at rest tends to stay at rest, and a body in motion tends to stay in motion. So when you're talking about a little camera like this versus this much larger, heavier G95, you're going to have a harder time holding this steady because it's not as heavy. When you hold this big, large camera, there's a certain amount of stabilization that's occurring just because This thing weighs a whole lot more than this does. Your muscles are tensed up a little bit more, right? And holding it steady. So that's my tip on the ZS200. If you're finding that at the telephoto end you're getting soft images, pay attention to your shutter speed and raise it. You know, I would say 1/250th minimum. Of course, you're up against the fact that you have limited aperture ability to open up here. It's a slow lens, so you know your ISOs are going to creep up. You know, ISO 3200 on this camera, pretty noisy, but if you run it through Topaz Photo AI, it's really salvageable. So you know, that's a good thing. Hopefully this is helpful to you. So if it is, please hit the like button. Any questions and comments, pop them down below. I'll try to get to those as soon as I can. And if you're here and this was useful, hey, hit the subscribe button and ring the little bell so you know when I'm posting new content. I'm Todd Banner. I will see you next time.